I once dreamed of a joyful life with Roy, imagining us building a happy home together. However, that dream quickly turned sour. Roy's parents began to overstay their welcome, turning our home into their personal hangout spot from dawn till dusk every single week. They lounged around without a care, piling their responsibilities onto me as if I were an extension of their household staff. To make matters worse, Roy would often leave to enjoy his hobbies, leaving me to deal with everything alone, which only added to my growing frustration. One day, I returned home to an astonishing scene. Roy was moving my belongings out of my bedroom. Confused and alarmed, I demanded an explanation, only to be met with a smirk from his mother, who casually announced that my room would now be repurposed for their use. According to Roy, I was to relocate to the storage room, a statement that left me utterly speechless. To add insult to injury, they mentioned a family trip planned for the next day, a trip I was not only uninformed about but also uninvited to, as I was bluntly told to stay behind and look after the house because I wasn't considered real family. Feeling belittled and disrespected in my own home, a fierce anger began to simmer within me. I couldn't believe the audacity they had to treat me this way, to make unilateral decisions about my life and space as if I had no say. But amidst the shock and anger, I started to formulate my own plans, unwilling to let this situation define me. My name is Sandra, and I'm a housewife in the 5th year of a marriage that had begun with so much promise. Roy and I met at a work event, where his charm and sociability immediately caught my attention. Over time, our professional interactions evolved into a personal connection, and we fell in love. Despite my reservations about his gambling habits, which he assured were just harmless fun, we moved forward with our relationship and got married. Having lost my own parents in my teens and grown up with relatives, the idea of having a family of my own was deeply important to me. Roy understood this and assured me that his family would welcome me with open arms, offering me the sense of belonging I yearned for. At first, his family did seem welcoming, with his parents appearing calm and friendly, and his sister Michelle striking me as glamorous and beautiful. However, the reality of our day-to-day life together was a far cry from the harmonious family unit I had envisioned. When I first met Roy's family during our initial Christmas gathering and at various home parties, they struck me as kind and welcoming. Michelle, Roy's sister, was particularly striking, and initially, I felt warmly received. However, as time passed, a different side of Michelle and her parents began to emerge, one that was less kind and far more judgmental. One day, while sharing stories with Roy and his family, I mentioned that my parents had passed away when I was just 12 years old. Michelle's response was unexpectedly harsh and mocking. "I see, that explains it, Sandra. I've always thought you were a bit off. Must be because you lacked parental love. Now it all makes sense." Her words stung deeply. Despite being raised by relatives after my parents' death, I never felt unloved. My aunts showered me with all the affection they could, more than making up for my loss. Michelle's insensitivity left me feeling bitter and misunderstood. Michelle had recently gotten married but would often visit us, using her husband's business trips as an excuse. She claimed cooking for one was too troublesome, preferring instead to join us for meals. Despite the availability of delivery services or takeout options, she seemed too thrifty to consider spending the money. "I feel lonely eating alone," she'd say sweetly, convincing Roy to invite her over. "I'd love to have dinner with you, Roy." And just like that, charmed by her, Roy would agree, even if it meant changing our dinner plans last minute to accommodate her whims. One evening, despite having dinner ready, Michelle declared, "Roy, I want shrimp and bacon and a Royado cream pasta." Roy immediately agreed, suggesting we postpone our chicken stew to cater to her request. Frustrated, I pulled Roy aside to express my concerns quietly. "It's really inconvenient," I told him. "I've prepared a vegetable salad as a side dish, and now you want me to cook another meal?" "We can have the rest Royaro," he argued, missing the point entirely. "That's not the point," I replied, exasperated. "You know I work full-time, and I handle all the shopping and cooking because cooking isn't your strong suit." My frustration wasn't just about the extra cooking. It was about the lack of consideration for my time and efforts, and the imposition of Michelle's whims over our household routines. Waking up early to prepare the day's meal became a part of my routine, a dedication to ensuring we enjoyed a nice dinner together. Yet, when Michelle expressed a desire to have something different, Roy's reaction was unexpected. "My sister wants to eat your cooking. You should feel grateful. What's there to complain about?" His words, filled with annoyance, left me dumbfounded. Despite my efforts, he insisted I should cater to her whims, making it painfully clear where his priorities lay. This realization made me question our understanding of family as I headed out to the grocery store, feeling more like a servant than a partner in our marriage. Another unsettling aspect of our life was the overly intimate relationship between Roy and Michelle. Their interactions often crossed the boundaries of sibling affection, with feeding each other at the table and taking cozy selfies. When I voiced my discomfort, Roy brushed it off with laughter, asking if I was jealous. "It's not about jealousy," I tried to explain. "It's about the appropriateness of your actions." But my concerns fell on deaf ears, his dismissal making me feel isolated in my own home. The dynamic shifted temporarily when Michelle's husband took on more domestic roles, reducing her visits. I hoped for a reprieve, a chance to find peace in our home. However, this hope was shattered one weekend morning by the early ring of our doorbell at 5:30 a.m. As Roy and I, groggy and confused, checked who it was, we saw his parents standing outside. Surprised by their early visit and without a prior announcement, we opened the door. They entered, immediately commenting on the house's beauty, a sentiment seemingly echoed from Michelle's descriptions. Despite our confusion at their early arrival, they seemed oblivious to the inconvenience, praising the house's spaciousness and comfort as they toured each room, including the most private spaces, with a sense of entitlement and satisfaction. This unexpected intrusion was yet another reminder of the blurred lines and misplaced priorities that had come to define our family life. I appreciated the comfort of our home, but the announcement from Roy's mother that they'd be visiting every week was unexpected and frankly overwhelming. "We'll make this a weekly visit. Count on it," she declared, settling onto the sofa as if she owned the place, flipping on the TV and immediately asking about breakfast. "Sandra, how about something simple? Bread, sunny side-up eggs, bacon, and a few pickles should do." As they made themselves at home, Roy decided it was the perfect time to return to bed, leaving me to deal with everything. "I'm heading back to sleep." "Sandra, you've got this," he mumbled, ignoring the growing frustration I felt. Despite my attempts to stick to our usual weekend routine of oatmeal for breakfast, Roy's parents had other ideas, and their weekly visits became a reality. They would arrive every Saturday, regardless of the weather or time, disrupting the one day I had to myself. These visits were exhausting. Smiling and making polite conversation while serving them took a toll on me, especially since Roy would conveniently find reasons to be elsewhere, only returning once they had left. This pattern went on for over 3 years, straining my patience and my relationship with Roy's family. One day, unable to contain my frustration any longer, I asked them to please consider visiting less frequently, as their constant presence was making it impossible for me to enjoy my weekends. Roy's mother, unfazed, simply smiled and suggested I should feel free to leave the house if I needed space. "It's fine, dear. We're just visiting our son. If you're busy, go ahead and do your thing." Taking her advice, I decided to spend the following Saturday by myself. I left early, indulging in a day of shopping and movies, and even treating myself to dinner. Upon returning home, I found Roy waiting with a stack of receipts from their day: $50 for a sandwich, $800 for sushi, and $100 for grilled turkey, not to mention drinks and snacks. "Mom said you should reimburse her for these next week," Roy said casually, as if it was the most natural request in the world. The sight of the littered dining table covered in dirty dishes and snack wrappers was the last straw, highlighting the disregard they had for me and our home. It was clear something had to change. Having spent the previous day tidying the house, I was disheartened to find it in disarray yet again. The situation worsened when Roy informed me that I was expected to cover the cost of the expensive delivery orders his parents had made during their visit. "It's your responsibility since you weren't here," he said, placing the blame squarely on my shoulders. This accusation left me feeling hurt. All I wanted was a peaceful day off. Yet, in an effort to avoid conflict with Roy, who is usually calm and considerate when we're alone, I held back my complaints. Determined not to endure such expenses again, I resolved to return to cooking meals myself. However, Roy's nonchalant behavior persisted, even in the presence of his parents, which only added to my growing sense of dread every weekend. Then, one Friday, I came home to find an unexpected and unsettling scene. Roy was moving my belongings, including my work laptop, out of my room. Confused and alarmed, I protested, only to be interrupted by his parents, who nonchalantly declared they were moving my things to make space for themselves. They announced, with an air of finality, that my room would now be theirs, and I was to move into the storage room. Roy's mother laughed at my shock, explaining that they had decided to move in permanently, a plan concocted without my knowledge or consent. According to her, this was Michelle's idea, believing I would resist if they approached the subject directly. Instead, they chose to take over the house under the guise of a visit. They justified their actions by saying the storage room's proximity to the kitchen would make it easier for me to attend to their needs, with Roy even suggesting that I should quit my job to fulfill my duties as a daughter-in-law. As if the night couldn't get any more surreal, Roy's mother suddenly shifted gears, reminding everyone that they needed to rest up for a family trip planned for the next day. A trip I was, of course, not invited to. This abrupt invasion of my personal space and the expectation for me to adapt to their convenience highlighted the deep lack of respect and consideration they had for me, leaving me to reconsider the dynamics of this family I'd once been eager to be part of. Learning I wasn't included in their family vacation was a bitter pill to swallow. "You're staying home. You're not really family," she said with a smirk, making their 3-week European adventure seem like a taunt. "And don't forget to clean up while we're away," were her parting words, leaving me in a whirlwind of emotions as their laughter echoed through the corridors of what was supposed to be my sanctuary. This blatant disrespect in my own home was the final straw, sparking a determination within me to reclaim my independence and dignity. The moment Roy and his family embarked on their trip, I set my plan into motion. I meticulously packed my essentials, leaving behind the bulkier items for later storage. After securing a temporary refuge in a hotel, I initiated the process of completely dissociating myself from the house that was no longer a home. This involved selling what I could online, discarding what I couldn't, and coordinating closely with a demolition company for what was to come next. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity, culminating in a call from Roy that caught me mid-lunch at the hotel. His voice, laced with confusion and panic, conveyed the shock of returning to find the house gone. "It's not there anymore." "What happened?" he demanded. I reminded him calmly that house was never our house in the traditional sense. It was a gift from my parents, renovated on my dime. It's always been mine. Roy's attempt to assert his role as the head of the household fell flat as I corrected his misunderstanding. Despite his protests and traditional views on marital roles, I stood firm. I pointed out not only the fallacy of his argument about who should bear the responsibility of caregiving based on income, but also the outdated notion of a royaltically assigning such duties to the wife. "Your parents, your responsibility," I asserted, challenging the presumption that I should sacrifice my career for his family's needs. This conversation was a stark revelation of the chasm between our perceptions of partnership and responsibility. His surprise at learning my potential earning power, had I not been constrained by domestic duties, underscored the depth of his underestimation. It was a pivotal moment, marking my transition from a passive participant in their family dynamics to an assertive individual reclaiming her right to make decisions for her own life. Venting the pent-up frustration was cathartic, though it provoked a sharp response from Roy. "You're my wife. Don't get ahead of yourself. Shouldn't you be trying to get along with my family?" His words, steeped in anger, failed to acknowledge the effort I had already put in. An effort met with disrespect and imposition from his side. His protest about the sale of the family home, which left him supposedly without a fallback, didn't sway me. "What I do with my property is my decision," I responded calmly, asserting my independence. When Roy inquired about the whereabouts of their belongings, I informed him that everything was stored safely, indicating that the cost of storage would be addressed in the divorce proceedings. The mention of divorce caught him off guard, leading him to mistakenly believe this was all just a temporary spat. But for me, the decision was clear. His claim that we had been getting along fine ignored the reality of our situation, where any semblance of peace was maintained by me enduring his family's behavior. His attempt to shift blame and insist on an apology from me, despite his family's overt hostility, was the final straw. I ended the call, resolved to move forward with the divorce. In the days that followed, as I sought legal advice, I received an unexpected call from Richard, Michelle's husband, seeking advice on his own marital troubles.
The need to address these intertwined issues led me to arrange a meeting with Roy, his parents, and Michelle at the hotel where I was staying. Despite my reluctance to face them again, it was necessary to clarify matters once and for all. Michelle's outrage at being summoned mirrored her usual disdain, but I remained composed, using the moment to reveal the truth about her and Richard's situation, based on Richard's own revelations to me. As I gently prodded about Michelle's secretive actions, her confidence wavered, and when I mentioned Richard's intent to divorce, a fact she had kept hidden, the shock was palpable among the family. The revelation that Michelle was not only separated but actively hiding her marital strife, still legally Richard's wife, added a layer of complexity and urgency to the situation. Michelle's outburst at being exposed marked a turning point, shedding light on the tangled web of secrets and lies that had been straining our relationships. This confrontation, although uncomfortable, was a necessary step toward untangling the mess and moving forward. I spread the revealing photographs across the table, watching as Michelle scrambled to hide the evidence by stuffing the pictures into her skirt pocket. But her actions were futile. Roy and his parents had already seen enough to start questioning her about the unfamiliar men captured with her in the images. "Who are these people, Michelle? And why are you entering a hotel with someone other than Richard?" they demanded, their confusion turning to accusation. Michelle's frustration was directed at me, accusing me of prying into her private life. I explained that Richard had come to me, troubled by her behavior and seeking advice. He had shared his suspicions about her infidelity and his wish for a straightforward divorce, leading me to seek out a private investigator to uncover the truth. Michelle's response was shockingly candid. She admitted to viewing Richard as nothing more than a financial resource, expressing no desire to divorce and lose her comfortable lifestyle. Her admission of infidelity during Richard's business trips was brazen, as she justified her actions with minimal household responsibilities and a blatant disregard for her marriage vows. This revelation left her parents visibly distressed, condemning her lack of contribution to her household and suggesting that any reasonable partner would consider separation. As the discussion unraveled Michelle's true character, Roy naively supported her, fantasizing about a future filled with luxury condos and lavish lifestyles. His encouragement seemed to reinforce Michelle's delusional mindset until I pointed out the impracticality of their dreams, highlighting Roy's financial instability and Michelle's significant debt. The mention of her debt, specifically the collection notices that had mistakenly been opened by me, visibly unsettled Michelle. This detail underscored the depth of her financial irresponsibility, adding another layer to the already complex situation. As the reality of their precarious financial standing dawned on them, the room filled with a tense silence, a stark contrast to the earlier exchanges. This moment of revelation not only exposed the flawed dynamics at play but also underscored the unsustainable nature of their actions and aspirations. The revelation that I was privy to Roy's financial deceit left everyone at the table in a state of shock. His parents and Michelle were particularly taken aback when I mentioned that his company was one of my clients, and I had recently discussed Roy's situation with a colleague who was under the impression that he was struggling financially due to the burden of caring for his parents. This lie Roy had concocted to cover his gambling debts was news to his family, sparking disbelief and dismay. Roy, desperate and cornered, pleaded with me not to disclose his secret, but I reminded him that the consequences of a lie fall on the liar. His protest was cut short as I suggested it was time for him and his family to leave, The weight of the day's confession seemed to visibly age his parents, who were now confronted with the harsh realities of their children's lives: Michelle's infidelity and Roy's financial ruin. Roy's situation quickly spiraled downward from there. He signed the divorce papers in a daze, his professional life crumbling as his misuse of salary advances came to light. Although his boss initially reprimanded him, his defiant attitude led to his eventual dismissal. His flippant remark about his right to spend his earnings on gambling was the final nail in the coffin, leading to his resignation amidst a mountain of debt. In a last-ditch effort to salvage his situation, Roy reached out to me, not with an apology, but with a plea for a substantial loan, further showcasing his refusal to confront the reality of his actions responsibly. My response was swift and final. I blocked him. His inability to recognize his faults and his continuous evasion of responsibility left me with no other choice but to cut off all ties, leaving him to face the consequences of his decisions alone. Word reached me through a friend at his former workplace that Roy had downsized to a modest living situation, juggling numerous part-time gigs from dawn till dusk to chip away at his mountain of debt. Michelle, too, found herself in a tight spot after Richard initiated legal proceedings for divorce, compelling her to settle financially not just with him but also with her affair partner's spouse. This sequence of events drove her to take up part-time work and move back with her parents, where domestic chores became a battleground of avoidance and conflict. In the meantime, I turned a new leaf, securing a condo where peace and solitude became my new normal. Gone were the days of unexpected family intrusions, Roy's persistent disregard for my grievances, and the awkwardness of witnessing his and Michelle's inappropriate closeness. With family dynamics no longer a concern, I dedicated myself more fully to my career, welcoming overtime and weekend work. This commitment paid off with a promotion to team leader for an upcoming project, marking a significant milestone in my professional journey. While my attempt at nurturing a traditional family may have faltered, the challenges faced brought me closer to my colleagues, creating a sense of kinship and mutual support that filled the void left by my personal trials. As I look ahead, my focus is on fostering growth in both my career and personal connections, embracing the opportunities and relationships that lie ahead with open arms and a hopeful heart.